My name is Tarek Shrabati. I'm the Senior Director for Programs here at the REC Foundation. And to answer these questions, we've got our Directors of Regional Operation on the line as well. It's Jim Crane, Lisa Schultz, Mike Martis, and Andy Schaffs. And so I'm just going to go ahead. These are pre-submitted questions that were put in. I'm going to go ahead and farm these out to the different folks for answers. So I'm looking to make sure that they've all turned themselves on in terms of unmuting themselves. And I see that some of them haven't had a chance to do that yet. So if you haven't had a chance, please go ahead. So Lisa, I've seen you've already unmuted yourself. I'll start with you. It says, teams in our region have expressed concern that the change-up Q&A is not being answered in a timely manner. In particular, one question that was asked 2 months ago has not been answered. The teams I spoke to about this are holding off investing time into their robot design until the question is answered. They want to avoid investing a lot of time in their design. Is there a way the GDC can ensure questions with significant weight will be answered in a timely manner?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. So I can sort of, in general, address that question. The GDC does try their best to answer questions promptly, because we know it is very important to teams to get that clarification. There are times where a particular question is maybe difficult to answer, or we really make a point of making sure that everybody on the GDC has an opportunity to comment on these questions and discuss them. So I would say that this is probably one of those questions that is a little bit more challenging to answer, and the GDC just wants to make sure that it's done correctly. But we definitely will give that feedback to the GDC committee to try to address that specific one as soon as possible.
All righty, thanks, Lisa. I'm going to address the next question to Jim. And that question is, will signature events be postponed this year? By the way, Jim is in charge of signature events. The asker goes on to say, I'm concerned about teams from outside the state attending our event. Jim?
Yeah, so signature events, we are planning on still approving those and having those. Absolutely. So if one of the event partners does want to host a signature event, we do have an application. For some of the ones that are already, planning on hosting it and thinking about it, yes, you can. And I think the question comes from, with this outside state. Last year we, reserved, I think 50% of the spot for teams outside of the region. This year we changed that to reserving only 25% of the spots to outside of the region. But that doesn't mean that those spots have to go to that outside. It's a reserve. It's almost like early bird. It's just a different way of doing early bird, so that teams from outside the region have a chance to come in and play. If teams don't take that opportunity, we remove that requirement 4 weeks before the event, and then anybody can attend. And so if you have an event in Georgia or something like that, 25% of the spots, so if you have 100 team events, 25% of the spots would be 25 teams, are held in reserve. Anybody outside of Georgia can register, but if only Georgia teams have registered 4 weeks before the event, it opens up and all teams from Georgia can also register for that. So I hope that answers that question. It is going to be definitely flexible.
All righty. Thanks, Jim. Next one is for Mike. How can I run a skills-only league that limits the number of participants?
That's a really good question, because I think we're going to all have to be flexible this year. And I think one of the opportunities we have is that we can utilize the power of the league system to be able to run skills. And so a skills league format basically is a meeting of several, is a great way to control the flow and the amount of students at a facility by creating a schedule that the teams can meet the rules of the competition facility. The league configuration can be 3 or more dates, final session. This time span encourages one of the things that we're really strong on with the REC Foundation, and that is the iteration of design. You want to give teams opportunities, and leagues do that, to be able to work on their robot to be able to make their robot stronger. And we know a lot of teams are going to put their designs on YouTube, and they're going to be looking on YouTube and say, hey, I can do that also. I'm going to change my robot. And so the next skills league event that they go to, they will be able to have an improved robot for it. All of this is a little vague in some respects, because I think what you're going to need to do is to contact your regional support manager. Your regional support manager can assist you with the processes and procedures. Our new event partner guide that Lisa has been working on and that will be out soon will have a whole section in it dedicated to leagues and how leagues work. And between that documentation and working with the RSM, I think you can find that having a skills-only league with flexible schedules for coming in to meet whatever guidelines, rules that your federal, state, local, regional, school district will have will be very, very important. So if there's any other questions on this, feel sure to send them our way.
Alrighty, thanks, Mike. Next question is for Andy, and that is, if a particular region is not able to host any in-person events due to COVID-19, will all the spots from that region to the World Championship be allocated via skills?
I think we just had a great presentation from Grant. So to not reiterate all the things he said, I'm excited about the opportunities that there will be to still compete. And within each region, there's a regional support manager that's going to help that region figure out what's best. If there is an impossibility of events, and that is a far-reaching statement, I completely understand, then that regional support manager is going to work with ourselves and Tarek and all the way up to Dan to make sure that the most fair way of getting people qualified to go to Worlds is exactly what happens. And per the qualification criteria, it is right now via skills, and it has been for years. So it is, just like every other year, extremely important to do skills. But the one thing I got from Grant's presentation more than anything is how exciting it is to be a part of this season. I mean, I think back, or I think forward 2 or 3 years from now, and how there will be teams that will remember the season of COVID more than any other season in their careers. So if you're on the fence about registering a team, go ahead and do it and be part of this historic season.
Alrighty, thanks a lot, Andy. Jim, next question is about the Create US Open. Have there been any decisions made about the Create US Open?
Yes, actually, I've been in contact with the Crepe Foundation, and they are planning on having their event this season. We are making that a signature event this year. That does not mean it gets spots. Some of the signature events are after season, and Create is one of those, so it's past the deadline to actually qualify to Worlds, but it's still a signature event in the fact that it is a highly produced event and worth attending. If you're interested in going to that event, put yourself on the wait list, and you do have to qualify into it, just like previous seasons. They will contact you and let you know if you've qualified, and their qualification is going to be a little bit fluid, just like anything else, depending on, they're going to be looking at skills, they're going to be looking at awards that you've won. So if you put yourself on the wait list, they'll check you out and make sure that you're up to par, and if you are, they'll invite you.
Alrighty, thanks, Jim. Next question is for Mike. Are we going to reduce the number of teams at tournaments?
No, not really. I mean, in fact, I think this is an opportunity that many teams will have opportunities to run skills at more events. They'll be able to do some things, and it just won't be maybe as many in-person events as they've had in the past, but there are other opportunities along the line. So it depends upon your region. Some may not. It will be important to follow whatever regulations that there are from federal, state, local. We say this over and over again, including the school district and the venue where you're at. So deciding this, in deciding the size of the event, remember that it's all about safety for the students, safety for the coaches that are there, and safety for anybody who is allowed to be in this event. One suggestion that has come up a number of times is to limit the number of students at the event. Grant did touch on that a little bit. number of coaches at the event. And we're even talking about the fact that some event partners are even thinking about live streaming the events so the parents, the grandparents, cousins, uncles, aunts can all get a chance to watch and celebrate with the students, because all of these events that they attend during the season are really celebrations and creations of their design. They're so proud of everything they do. And I think using the word flexibility, and in the terms of what Tarek would say, Gumby, being very, very flexible, I think that you will find that there will actually be more opportunities, especially when you start considering the fact that we've got a lot of online challenges that students will be able to be involved in. With that, I think it's all up to the creativity of the event partners and using our guides that we have for restarting and using the accommodations requests that Grant showed and talked about a little bit. I think we'll be fine. I think we'll have a lot of events for teams, and in some cases possibly even more, because I think of the team that's in the far reaches of Arizona. Now they could attend virtually some other skills events that they couldn't normally go to.
Yeah, that's true. So we're going to be making some lemonade here. Grant mentioned the fact that and this is for Jim, that the V5 controller was being fast-tracked in order to have it operate the fields. Is the plan to eventually replace the current field control with the V5 system?
Yes, absolutely. It's the next generation field control. Right now they're testing it out with skills, and we're going to get a really good look at that. When I say we, mostly VEX, but their engineers are definitely looking at that, and it's things to come.
Great. So Lisa, do we know if there's going to be virtual components available for competitions in regions where schools are not meeting?
Yeah, so I'm really excited that Grant was able to share more of those opportunities before this session. And we are very excited to, sort of open those different pathways for teams to compete. And I think it's been said a couple of times that, we're definitely focusing on the virtual skills option. We really believe that this provides an opportunity for students to still experience the design process and iterating their designs and sort of demonstrating those abilities and testing them, and be able to show them in their robot skills matches. So, definitely work with your regional support manager to get those virtual skills events set up if that's something that would be convenient for you. And, if Grant also said, if you have different ideas, we did want to provide a pathway for you to share that through the accommodation request. So if you have an idea about a different virtual option, please do share that. We do want to make every effort to accommodate your organizations and make some, increase those opportunities for students this season.
All righty. Thanks, Lisa. Andy, school-based teams are not permitted, if school-based teams are not permitted to meet in person and just over Zoom, and private or homeschool teams are meeting and working on their robots, are we addressing the level playing field this year? It seems to be it should be all or none.
Yeah, I can definitely understand and recognize the apparent disparity between a team that can't meet yet and a team that can physically meet, I should say. There are many ways that I've communicated with teams in the different regions that have been very creative and what they have been able to do. I want to remind all the event partners that are coaches as well that the important thing we're doing here is teaching the engineering design process. And the beginning of that is the brainstorming and researching and game analysis and all those things. I mean, if it's a matter of getting an engineering notebook and getting started on that part as a team, go through that process. And as Grant said, there is a virtual component that's being released with skills only, but before that even happened, VEX published with RoboMatters creating it, but they published VEX Code VR. So as a team, you can start practicing your programming skills. There's nothing, I mean, granted, it is a VEX IQ virtual robot, but there's nothing that says we can't challenge each other on programming. Same thing with driver team certification. If you go to the session later on today or maybe tomorrow about certifications by RoboMatter, they're presenting it. They're going to tell you about how your driver team now can take the same or similar certification that the head refs do. So you can have, going into the season, it's going to be regional dependent, but I look forward to the day we all come together and can have a physical robot being built, but get prepared in advance, have strategy sessions, get the team certified, start your engineering notebook. This is the year I expect to see the best engineering notebooks ever, because you don't have that temptation of a physical robot sitting on a desk just waiting to be finagled with. You now have a good chance to follow that design process. And as a coach, that should be something you focus on. It might not be the best answer for those teams that are public schools. I come from public school, 12 years of being a public school coach, and I completely empathize with that. But I also know that as a team, most of the best ideas came from the research side. So that way, when you do get to your school, you can hit the ground running.
All righty, thanks, Andy.
Sure.
Mike, what are the expected precautions needed when preparing to host a local event?
Well, I really think it starts with a number one prime thing that we at the REC Foundation, and I'm sure you embrace as well, and that it starts with safety. It starts with safety, and any adherence to any federal, state, local, school district, or venue, if you're not operating inside the school, guidelines of what is allowed and what's not allowed, what are best practices, because there are no exact answers. Region to region, as Grant talked about, the differences from as far as California all the way up to Maine, from one reaches to the other. Regions are in different states of everything. And I think when you're considering precautions, you need to look at what are the current statuses of what's going on in your area. And this is where it's going to be real key also to keep close contact as you're developing events with your regional support manager. Many times the regional support manager supports 2 or 3 states. So in the conversation with you and them, you will discuss what's allowed and what's not allowed, but the final outcome has to be one that is flexible. Because when I turn on the news in the morning, I hear one thing, and when I turn on the news the next day, I hear something else. We're in a situation that is extremely fluid, but I think the format of the VEX Robotics competitions, the changes that we're making, is going to embrace flexibility. So we would ask that you explore all the possibilities for your local event. Do a layout. What is the best way to put the pits? What is the best way to have students in and out? What is appropriate, again, for your facility? And make sure that you know that you have to be flexible in all of your plans. And so old saying is, failing to plan, is planning to fail. And I think we all want to be successful. So I think it's real important that you work with the regional support manager in your area to get the best out of the event that you're planning.
All righty. So we have a question. I know we did talk about these in Dan's opening statement, but just in case somebody's joining us a little bit late, I'm going to ask it. Jim, is it possible for teams to apply for grants to participate? This person says that the fees to participate in this new competition are high for a very small school.
Yeah, so they're talking about the VEX Artificial Intelligence Competition, VAIC, and those registration fees are high. The reason that they're high is because unlike all the other teams out there in VRC and VEX IQ, when you register, you usually just get the license plate, right, and the game element. For this one, they're going to get all the things that they need to have a VEX AI robot. They're going to have to provide the base robot kit, of course, but it's the camera, all the software, all the different processors are going to come with the registration. And so that is the reason that the registration fee is high. Now, about the grants, it takes a sponsor to have a grant. Basically, the sponsor is paying your registration for you. And right now, we're doing a pilot season so that we can put this in front of different, different industry and have sponsors for this. So that is our plan, to have sponsors in the future, to have grants in the future, but not during this pilot year, because we need a pilot year to be able to show industry what we can do. And then from that, we expect to get some sponsorship.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. That makes a lot of sense. Andy, and this is one that's being asked a lot, but I'll throw it out at you. And how do I clean EDR equipment, metal and electronics, to eliminate exposure to COVID-19? And what are the best products to use? And I would go ahead and say that would also probably apply to the VEX IQ system as well.
Oh, I'm sure it applies to that. I'm sure it applies to drones and in our RAD
everything
program
else. Yep.
Everything else. Not to punt this one off to VEX, but we are working with VEX. And if you got a chance to watch the town hall with Grant and Dan last week, they presented that VEX Engineering is currently going through a slew of different cleaning products. They don't want to destroy their product or your product or anyone's product for that matter. So they're going through a slew of products. According to Grant, and we can get him on one of these Q&As too, but from the engineering standpoint, that is something they're working on, and it will be part of the August update or soon thereafter, as keeping both you, your students, your participants, your audience, and your robots safe.
All righty, thanks. And again, I know that this was partially answered in the last session, but just in case somebody joined us late, Jim, the question is, will event partners be allowed to move VRC change-up driver stations such that teams can be positioned in each corner of their field rather than side by side?
Yes, if you missed that session, Grant went over that and actually even had a picture of it, of how you do it. So it would wrap around each one of the corners. So each team would get basically a corner. And then with that, he talked about the fact that your partnered joystick, if you're using, one team actually has two drivers, even they will be able to be distance apart. And so if you have any questions about that, you can ask your regional support manager. They'll provide you with that.
All righty. Thank you. And Mike, next question is going to be for you. What do you recommend for remote learning?
Well, I really like this question because quite a few of us are retired educators or educators that have grown up with the REC Foundation. And I just want to go back and what the second letter in the REC Foundation is, and it's education. Robotics, Education, and Competition Foundation. And over the last 3 or 4 years, the REC Foundation has made, with the help of VEX and other sponsors, we have expanded the number of offerings for online opportunities. And one of the ones that just, if you get a chance or if you haven't looked at, you need to look at, are all the STEM labs that are available, and they're accessible through roboticseducation.org and also against vex.com. You can go there. But all these STEM labs are filled with excellent educational points that apply not just to robotics, but apply to their math, their science, their physics classes. These will really bring home all the classroom learning that right now may be a little weak in some cases, but this is all remote learning. If anybody would have said even 2 years ago that we would be over to a remote learning mode for maybe public education, and that's looking like that's somewhat possible, you would have been shocked at this time. So looking at our opportunities on our website, you can look at our online challenge opportunities, which are very STEM-oriented subject matters for students to get involved in. And I would suggest that every one of the students, both VRC and IQ, run through as many of those STEM labs. The educators should run through our education certification program, because that will make them stronger leaders for their teams. And event partners, you are sometimes both team leaders and run events, and I think this is an opportunity to look at a lot of the educational materials that we have, and those are really remote learning opportunities.
All righty, thanks, Mike. I'm going to actually take the next one myself. And that is, with VRC judging certification being released in the near future, will the rollout be similar to the way it was done with referee certification? In other words, with the judging certification, will it only be required at championship and world qualifying events the first year, and then be required possibly at all events the following year? Right now, our plan is, first of all, that the judge certification is for judge advisors. We're not requiring every judge to take it. We are shooting for state championship event judge advisors being certified at this point. World Championship judge advisors would definitely be certified at this point. As far as moving things forward, I think one of the things is, along with everything else that we're doing right now, we're going to have to play that one by ear. I will also take this opportunity to point out that there's a number of different certifications that we've been rolling out this year. Our staff's been really, really busy working on different resources for you. Lisa was working on the EP certification. Jim does the the referee certification. But they've also rolling out a kind of a team certification this year, which is similar to the judging certification, so that teams can understand how similar to the referee certification, in that it will explain to teams how things are being done. And then we've got a couple of other things in the pipeline right now. Next question I am going to ask of Andy, and that is, and it's a little early because we are going to have some judge sessions later on. Actually, we've got a number of them, and that is, how will the engineering notebook be submitted this year? And you can punt that one if you want.
Oh yeah, I don't want to steal the thunder from the judging team session. That is, I guess I could look at my schedule real quick. Is it later on today or tomorrow?
There's a number of them coming up.
There's a few. How you're gonna submit though, it's gonna be events specific. I guess I can give you that as a preview, a little foreshadowing of things to come, but it's regional specific. Hey, if it's January and we're all getting back into the same building together, same old, same old. You drop it off at the registration desk and keep your fingers crossed that yours was the best on the table. Until then, though, it's going to be dependent on the event and whether that's virtual or whatnot. So, again, I don't want to give away any of the fun stuff for later.
All righty, thanks, Andy. I know that was kind of a curveball that we threw at you there, but you're welcome. Another question that came in, and I'm going to really put Lisa on the hot seat here, because I'm going to ask her, will event partners be allowed to limit the number of students that attend from each team? Say an EP mandates only 2 students and 1 adult from each team can attend an event due to COVID. On the side note, can the REC Foundation provide information on the average team size based on waivers? To that, I would say, well, I'll let you answer it. And this would allow EPs to understand how many students on average attend each team. So take it away, Lisa.
Yeah,
sorry.
Sure. So to kind of address the first question in terms of what can EPs do in terms of limiting the participants for events. Actually, this kind of came up at the end of last season when state championships were having, I used to support Washington, and that was the first area where that concern came up, and there's a lot of discussion about that. And quickly following that, all over the world, that we had to sort of answer these types of questions. And one thing, just to reiterate, is just, yes, we're very flexible. Some of the things that are really important for an event partner is to be extremely transparent on their event website. So when you create your event on Robot Events, whatever you and your RSM talk about and discuss and come to an agreement on, it's just really important to communicate that to teams. And so I'd be just really as transparent as possible of what those expectations are. If there's specific requests that go beyond what may be considered normal, again, we can look at using the accommodation request if it sort of needs to be. But sort of at the forefront is we want to make sure that it's safe for students and safe for participants. So, you know, sort of following whatever local guidelines and restrictions you guys have, we definitely want to accommodate those requests and make it sort of accessible to all teams. So again, work with your RSM on that, and they'll be able to help you sort of make those recommendations, and just be sure that it's just, again, really clear to all the teams that are registering ahead of time on your event page, and possibly some, you know, just direct emails to communicate those expectations. And even consider, you know, if you're going to limit that, if you have the ability to live stream those, and that way those from outside can sort of be a part of that process or part of the event if that's possible. The second part of the question, I think, was what's the average team size? I mean, just from my personal experience, the VEX IQ team size, they usually range from anywhere from 2 to 5. VRC maybe similar, you know, 3 to 6. Then that's just sort of a ballpark range. Definitely could be more than that, but I would say that's probably the average. And I definitely welcome anyone else on the panel to add on to that if you have more information.
Lisa, I would agree, you know, the sizes you give out, and also say that it's all about resources. And at some schools, they may only have 3 or 4 students that are available because of other activities to be on the robotics team. But then there are other schools that find that as they grow, they have to decide how big are they going to want to have the team, because it's real important that these kids be engaged in all activities with the robotics. So if a team gets up to 6 and 7 and 8, they really need to think about splitting into 2 teams so that everybody on the team gets the most educational experience out of that robot build.
Alrighty, couple of questions here that have come in. Most of these questions have been pre-submitted, but there's a couple that have come in while we've been speaking, and any that we don't get to right now, we will definitely get to, because we have a Q&A like this each day. One is, do we know when the EP certification is going to become available? And I know who I can ask that. Lisa, I'm going to put you on the hot seat again.
Yeah, no worries. So this is a very exciting opportunity, and I know a lot of people like say Lisa did this, but it was not just me. In fact, it was a huge portion of our staff that contributed to the development of this EP certification, and we've been working on this since early March, and in coordination with RoboMatter on this. So I am doing a bigger session on this and going over more of the details of what's in the EP certification. Right now, it's in the final stages. I will give that, expected to be released this fall, and we hope to give more specifics soon. But yeah, I would say fall is where I would say it's going to be available to the public.
All righty, excellent. Another question that's come out, and I think I'm going to probably throw this at Jim because he's most familiar with working with Create, and that is, will the REC Foundation allow game rules and tournament rules to be changed, or will Create be following our game and tournament rules, or will they make changes as they have in the past? And I think that we also need to explain in the past that it has been a scrimmage.
Yes, in the past, it was a separate event. It didn't qualify teams to anything, and it was not designated as a signature event. We got that question a lot, like, why isn't Create? It's obviously a signature event. Why is it not? And that's exactly why, is because they changed the rules. Well, this year, they're going to be a signature event, which means they are going to follow the game rules as written, and all these things. Now, obviously, the social distancing, and it's a weird year to start that, but this is the year we're doing it. Except I will say that they do have a division that is called I think it's their Create division, and that one is a separate event. It's not part of the signature event series. That it will have their open source type rules. And so when you're registering for that event, make sure you're either registering for that open division if you want those open rules, or you're registering for the signature events and then you'll be following the normal game rules of a signature event of using the game manual.
All righty. And as a follow-up to that, do you happen to know when that event's going to happen?
Same week that it always happens. So I don't have that off the top of my head, but it's not changing. So it's after season.
It's usually late March. So all righty, thank you. Here's one that we can ask, but quite frankly, I think this really needs to go to the GDC and be posted online, and that is, how long is a Cortex platform going to be legal for VRC? Anybody want to take a shot at that one? Or should we send that one over to the official Q&A? I think that's what we're going to do with that one. Just so you know, there's certain ground rules we have here, and one is that we try not to answer official rules that fall under the purview of the GDC.
Oh, actually, Tarek, I'll jump in a little bit
Go
on
ahead.
that one. It's actually not just with the official Q&A, you're asking about game rules this season.
Yep.
If you're asking about game rules like next season, are you thinking about this? You can always send an email to GDC, at vexrobotics.com or just vex.com, either one. And those are the kind of things that if you have suggestions or thoughts, because sometimes we get those type of questions on the Q&A, and that's not really what the Q&A is for. It's but if you have a thought on that, we'd love to hear about it. But we're looking at all possibilities right now.
All righty, great. Makes sense. Everything, you know, Mike kind of alluded to it. My philosophy on everything is we need to be very flexible right now as we're working through this. So I'll throw this one out to the team. Any thoughts on approval process for events, specifically the deadlines? And would it make sense to have 2 or 3 deadlines throughout the season? So who wants to answer on what we're planning to do for that?
This is Mike. I can just jump in, and then Jim also has worked very, very strong with the qualifying criteria. I think the overall thing is that we have to be flexible on that. We want to get them as posted as soon as possible, because it's important that teams will be able to see what events there are so that they can make plans accordingly. And we do have an October 1st deadline. And we do know we have to be a little bit flexible this year. And we had that deadline for a lot of really, really good reasons that may not quite apply this year. Jim?
So we talked about this internally a little bit, and Andy had a really good thought on this. So about what it means this year and things like that. So I would give him my time.
You yield your time to the gentleman from Texas.
The gentleman from Texas will accept Jim's time. Nothing brain melding here, but keeping the October 1st. So if you're looking for events right now and you're disappointed that you don't see them, please acknowledge, just like every year previous to this, October 1st is the deadline for posting those events. And so your regional support managers are working with the event partners throughout their whole region to make sure that even in a COVID world, that we don't have 8 events on the same day. So between now and October 1st, we're having our local EP events. We're having our one-on-one conversations with event partners, and we're encouraging to have similar, if not the same events. It might be virtual, it might be skills only, but having the similar same events they've had for the last 4 or 5 years. We have events that are the 8th annual fill in the blank here event. We're not going to shirk them the same weekend that they've had. Create is an example of that. Now, once that October 1st comes and goes, your regional support managers are going to be quite flexible on adding more events. If we get some sort of a vaccine or cure in December, and now everyone wants to have their events in January and February, we're going to make sure people can still qualify. So as a team, we have some strategies in place to hold some of those qualification spots for later in the year, so that we can host those events. We can allow y'all to host those events. So if y'all want to add to that, please do, but don't be shocked if you don't see an event before October 1st published date. That does not mean we're not having a season. In fact, if anything, it means you should be even more excited, because you'll get the big fanfare of October 1st and seeing all the events that are going to happen.
All righty, perfect.
Hey, Tara, can
One,
I add on to that
yes,
one?
please.
I was just going to say, and I think that's a really great question and sort of some feedback to event partners in general, that there are a lot of teams out there super anxious and looking for opportunities. So I would suggest that if, once things, I know that quote unquote become normal, or at least you have something that you're able to offer to teams, just know that teams are very anxious to try to participate. So if it is possible to post something, even if the registration's closed until you can finalize some of those details and work with your RSM on that, it's really great for teams to at least see some of those possible opportunities that could be happening in your region. So I know it's less, or it's a lot more tentative this year, but we definitely encourage EPs to post, if they can, their event, because a lot of teams are asking that question.
All righty, thanks, Lisa. And while you're on, since you did answer the question about EP certification, somebody wants to know if we're going to be requiring it.
Yes, they're all getting, no, I'm just joking. No, this is going to be very similar. Actually, it's a little bit different than the head referee and judge advisor certifications, and that it's a resource. Hosting an event is, takes a lot of knowledge and volunteers, and it was a challenge for the EP certification team to just try to determine what information should go in the certification, because we didn't want to overwhelm people, but we did want to prepare them. And so we targeted this certification for new EPs or EPs that maybe want a refresher on certain topics. And then we created what's called the EP guide, which is more exhaustive. And so it takes what's in the certification and expands upon that. So this first year, it is totally optional, but very recommended for brand new EPs or EPs that we actually want a lot of feedback. So if you have been hosting for a long time, we'd really appreciate it once it comes out that you go through the certification and give us the feedback so that we can improve it for the next season. But at this point, it is optional, but just highly recommended.
Yep, I like the feedback part. That's kind of the most important thing for us. I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
Were you going to say
No,
something?
I'd like to add to that a little bit, because with working with these certifications, you can think of them as trainings, and so it's not, since it's not required, you might jump in there and look to see what the different lessons are, because there's always a lesson. The certification is like a lesson and then a quiz about that lesson. And so if, I think it would really be beneficial for everybody to jump in there and see, okay, what are the lessons? And if all of a sudden you see something, you're like, oh, wait, I didn't even know that was possible. Or, I've always been wondering about, how to do that. Or it might trigger some things that you say, this is worth me reading at least this one unit, at least this one lesson on it. And so that would just kind of get your ball rolling. If all of a sudden, you're one of those event partners that you're so busy, you're involved in so many different things, and you're like, I don't have time to do a whole certification. Try one lesson, open it up, at least read through the contents, and I think you'll be surprised of how beneficial it really will be.
All righty, thanks, Jim. We had one last question, and I'm just going to say that we don't set policy on this. And the question is that masks have become a political hot button. Do we have support to require a mask? Our position is that EPs, coaches, teams should all be following their local and state guidelines. It's as simple as that. School districts may have their own guidelines, and one of the reasons we're doing this isn't that we want to avoid the question. It's the reality is that there are so many different guidelines out there that folks have to follow that it's impossible. For example, if you were to say, hey, follow your state or your school district guidelines. Some states have a single school district for the entire state. State of California has over 1,200 school districts. So it is impossible for us to be the police on that. Personally, I would encourage people to think about safety of kids, and more importantly, also safety of you mentors out there and EPs, right? So you want to be around with, I kind of joke, we want you around next year to help us run events again. So please be safe. That's what I want to say. At this point, we're going to have a 15-minute break. I want to thank Andy, Jim, Mike, and Lisa for answering questions. We will be back at lunchtime each day to answer additional questions. You can submit them via the question form if you want them submitted in advance, or you can put them in through the online chat. Talk to you later. Right now, time for a break.